Hello, little Vickies. Welcome back to my channel. Tonight, I'll be sharing some creepy stories from Reddit that are allegedly true. If you like what you hear, please subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the like button as it's incredibly helpful to me while trying to grow my garden of little Vickies here on YouTube. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night by 5 p.m. Pacific. If you have something to suggest or would just like to say hello, please leave a comment. I always reply. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and have read on the channel, send it to veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it more than I can say. Now it's time to relax and get on with the stories. This occurred to me and my then-girlfriend in the summer of 2004. My hometown was decimated by flooding from Hurricane Floyd in 1999. Part of the response and recovery efforts involved FEMA setting up RVs as temporary housing for those whose homes were either destroyed or heavily damaged. These RVs were set up in previously vacant fields outside of town. The park was dismantled by 2001 or so. They put up fencing around the perimeter and trenched over the other streets into the area to keep people out. But they forgot one entrance or left it purposely open for emergency vehicles to have access. Some friends of mine had found this entrance and we frequently used the area as our playground. We would go back there to set off fireworks, turn the streets into a race course, and to have sex with our girlfriends. To set the stage of how this place looks, there were 3 streets running east-west orientation, a street that went around the other streets in an oval fashion. The grass was very overgrown and about 4 feet high. The south and north side of the area was wooded. The east side had large dirt beams that were about 20 feet high and had been placed there when the site was graded in 1999. They normally provided a climbing challenge for our SUVs. This particular day, my girlfriend and I were parked on one of the east-west streets amongst the tall grass to remain hidden. We got undressed to have sex in the back seat of the car. As we begin, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. I turned to look, and there is a man coming over the 20-foot-high dirt beam. He's wearing denim overalls, and in his left hand is a full-sized axe. A wave of fear washed over me, and I yelled out, "Oh my God!" My girlfriend pops up to look out the back windshield and let out a scream, and, "What are we going to do?" I frantically start looking for the car keys. There's a pile of clothes in the floorboard, and I can't find them. I look out the back, and he's getting closer. I can see his face now, and it's emotionless with a blank stare. I start grabbing clothes and shaking them to hopefully find the keys. They pop loose and fall to the floor. I grab them and immediately jump into the driver's seat, still completely naked. I start the car, and from the back seat, my still-naked girlfriend screams, "Go!" I look in the rearview mirror as I'm putting the car into drive, and he's now within about 50 to 60 feet of the car. Same blank look, but staring at the car with the axe still in hand. I didn't even fasten my seatbelt, and I'm still fully nude as I floored the gas, kicking up rocks everywhere as the tires spun, as I sped away from this man holding the axe. We got out of the abandoned FEMA park as quickly as I could drive the car without crashing. My girlfriend was hysterical the whole time until we got back to the main road and were safe. We stopped about a mile up the road on the side of the road to put our clothes back on and de-stress. I don't know where this man came from, as there are no houses within a mile or so of the old FEMA site. He seemingly came out of nowhere. I also did not see any other cars at the site, as I had done a lap around the park before we chose our spot. I'm not sure what his intentions were, as he never said anything to us, and I know he saw us panicking in the car. Whatever his intentions were, I know they weren't good. The look on his face and the axe in his hand made that abundantly clear. I went back with a few friends a few days later and found no place this guy could have been lurking, and there were no signs anyone had been camping there. To this day, it's one of the scariest events I've ever been through. Whoever the Axeman was and whatever he was planning, let's not meet. When I was around 8 years old, my parents divorced, which resulted in my mom moving away and my sister, my dad, and I moving into a new house across town. My dad still lives in the house. My sister moved away 12 years ago, and I only moved out of my dad's place just last year. When we moved into the house, I remember I had felt very uncomfortable about sleeping in my new bedroom. Something felt very unwelcoming about it. Although it was just a normal bedroom in a house built in the 1960s. Due to this uncomfortable feeling, I would sleep on the landing for the first few weeks, until my dad got sick of me obstructing the toilet and bathroom doors and told me that I couldn't sleep there forever. I reluctantly began sleeping in my room, and the feeling went away. Fast forward to when I was 14 years old. My mom very sadly lost her battle with cancer, and it hit us all very hard. My dad had never stopped loving my mom, so he became very depressed for the second time since the divorce. My sister and I had a very hard time coping with the loss of our beloved mom at such a young age, and there were arguments with my mom's side of the family as everyone went through a really tough time grieving. Then really strange things began to happen in the weeks following my mom's passing. It started with the kettle blowing one day, and the next the fridge stopped working. A week later, our oven ceased to function, and the iron exploded as my dad ironed our school uniforms. Dad called out an electrician who checked all the wiring in the house and confirmed there was nothing wrong with it at all. We were all now very confused as to why all of these appliances had suddenly broken on us, as if things weren't hard enough to cope with already in a single-parent family. Then my sister's PC power supply exploded the next week. I was home alone one evening, and as I stood at the top of the stairs on the landing, the light bulb popped above my head. I remember the absolute fear that surged through me as I almost fell down the stairs in a panicked state. Dad called a different electrician the next day. Nothing wrong with the wiring upstairs either. Everyone is becoming really bothered by these occurrences by this point. After all, how can this many electrical appliances seemingly fail for no reason at all, and yet there is nothing wrong with any of the wiring, according to 2 different electricians? This leads up to the night I saw something I simply cannot understand. I remember I had gone to bed just like any other night when I awoke around 3 a.m. I would usually sleep right through the night unless I needed to go to the toilet or maybe get a drink if I woke up thirsty. I lay there a bit annoyed with waking without the need for either of these, and then I remember my feet suddenly felt very cold. I folded the quilt underneath my feet, and yet they still felt very cold, as if I had stuck them in a fridge or walked on a very cold stone floor. I became restless with this, and then that is when I noticed a light in the middle of my room. At first, I believed it was a reflection coming through my bedroom window, so I sat up and checked to see if anyone was parking up outside the street. Nothing. The whole street was dark. Even the streetlight was off. I turned back into bed and looked up at the ceiling. The light was still there, and this is when I noticed that the light wasn't on the ceiling. It was floating around a foot below it. I stared at it for about a minute and then rubbed my eyes, thinking that maybe I was seeing something that wasn't really there after not being awake for long. But I was wide awake, and the light remained floating there just below the ceiling. It wasn't an orb or a spherical shape, more like a small, flat, misty-looking patch of light. I got annoyed with trying to work out what this was and put it down to feeling tired, so laid back down in my bed and closed my eyes. I then felt the cold from my feet slowly shifting up my body until it reached my thighs, and then as I looked down at the foot of the bed, trying to work out why it suddenly felt so cold, I saw it. At the foot of my bed, I saw a shape that looked almost like someone's shadow, but standing just slightly away from the wall. It wasn't facing me, but looking across my room, and the more I looked, I could see the shape of the silhouette of a face and body. I'm looking at this shape and staring at it in total amazement of trying to work out what it is I am seeing. It's not flat to the wall like a shadow would be, but in the middle of the room, and I can see through it. It stands there for about a minute, and I'm thinking, is that a ghost? What is that? But I'm not frightened, and it doesn't make me feel threatened or that it's a malevolent presence. I'm just sat there in complete disbelief of what I'm seeing and amazed by it. The figure then very slowly, as if hovering, moves across the bottom of my bed towards the other side of the room. I can then see it isn't black like a shadow, but in fact it's an almost translucent dark brown, almost like a dusty window. It's very hard to describe just how it looked, but that is the best I can try to explain its appearance. As it moves across my room, I watch it pass in front of the ajar door where the landing light is shining against the wall, and just like that, it's gone. I can't believe what I've seen and am left sat up in bed, wide awake, amazed and stunned. I suddenly notice my legs don't feel cold and that the light that was hovering below the ceiling is gone. I sat up for about an hour trying to work out what I had seen and just experienced and tried to go back to sleep but was unable to from excitement. Eventually I fell asleep. I remember excitedly telling my sister about this the next day at breakfast, and she looks at me shocked before then telling me that she had heard someone whispering her names a few times while she was in bed several nights previous. She thought I had stood outside her door and was talking to her, but when she checked, nobody was there. My dad told me years later that he would lay in the living room on the floor watching TV late at night after Mum passed away and felt as if someone walked behind him and noticed it suddenly felt cold whenever this happened. I never felt afraid living in that house, and after about a year, nothing else seemed to happen. Things would go missing a lot of the time and then turn up in places you knew you never have put them yourself, and when asked, nobody else had touched them or moved them. It was a very strange time, but I still can't believe what I saw. I don't know if you'd call it a ghost, and it certainly wasn't a reflection, but it definitely caught my attention. We moved into a new house and lived there for several months when this happened. My boyfriend and I were laying in bed in our room just watching TV. This was kind of a routine every night. Near the TV, the door that goes to the living room was opened. I saw a white, see-through figure playing peekaboo at us between the bedroom door and the living room. My boyfriend saw it too and said, "What the hell was that?" He jumped up and walked toward it, but it somehow disappeared and wasn't around anywhere. There was suddenly an unmistakable smell of grass, like freshly cut grass that permeated the room strongly. The windows were all closed, and it was midnight. The smell seemed to disappear after 10 minutes. We sold the house 6 months later due to other unusual things that happened. I don't know what I saw that night and why that smell was connected to it. First of all, let me start off by saying I usually don't believe in evil spirits and being haunted by one. However, I absolutely love this subreddit, and I've had such creepy encounters in my sleep that I felt like this was the right place to share. The past couple of years, 1 to 2, I haven't had that good of an experience with sleep. I visited a small town in Italy with 2 of my best friends who happened to be a couple this past summer. Of course, they slept in a double bed while I slept on a convertible sofa in another room. Our accommodation was, to our surprise, located on top of a mountain, far, far away from the town we initially wanted to stay in. I'd say about a 15 to 20-minute bus ride, and the bus only drove 3 times a day. That was a huge disappointment, but not really a part of the story. Since we were located on top of this mountain, right along the main road where vehicles passed very seldomly, I tended to feel uneasy during the nighttime, especially since I slept alone and we rented a holiday apartment, not a hotel with many other people or something of that sort. The first night, I only got a little bit of sleep, also poor quality, but that was only because the sofa was a bit uncomfortable. On the second night, however, I woke up once in the middle of the night only to see a tall and slim outline of a person standing right at the foot of my bed, staring at me. Since I was so flustered and still tired, I didn't really process what was happening, pulled up my blanket over my head, and continued sleeping. The next morning, I realized what happened overnight, and I was petrified. I told my 2 friends at the breakfast table, and of course they called BS. I insisted that I knew what I saw, and I persuaded them to let me sleep in their bed for the next night, which was no problem since their bed was huge. Next night rolls around, and my best friend's boyfriend falls asleep relatively quick. However, my bestie and I were still up for 10 to 20 minutes, talking and whispering, trying not to wake her boyfriend up. Then we hear what sounds like someone putting keys in our front door and entering the hallway. We both were convinced that there was a person in our apartment walking around the kitchen and living room where my sofa was located. We both froze, and I literally thought we were going to die that night, since I've always had sketchy vibes ever since we first arrived. We woke up the third party only for him to tell us to go back to sleep, which we did. Next morning, it turns out that there is another family staying in the apartment right below us, and possibly an explanation would be that they entered their apartment yesterday night. But both of us genuinely believe that there was someone in our apartment casually walking around. On another not-so-pleasant occasion, I went to sleep normally in my bed a few months ago when I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night only to find that I can't move my body. My limbs were numb, I couldn't turn my head, I couldn't speak, I felt completely paralyzed. I've had sleep paralysis before, so I knew that this was just another night of bad sleep. However, this time it was different. I saw my dad turning on the light and walking around in the hallways passing my room, which isn't unusual, probably to get a glass of water or go to the toilet. I desperately and unsuccessfully tried calling out for him, but of course nothing but a whisper came out of my mouth. In that moment, I felt so helpless. My dad got what he needed, turned off the light, and went back to bed. And in the moment he switched off the light, I saw a dark and tiny creature/blob of shadow sitting on my desktop chair and staring at me. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it wanted from me. All of a sudden, this shadow jumps up, runs right up to me on the side of my bed, then jumps onto my bed only to repeatedly hop from one side of my pillow to the other. I felt so scared and terrorized in that moment, but I guess that terror finally woke me up and I could move again. The shadow was gone. I turned on the light and had to walk around my room for a few minutes just to return to reality and collect myself. I've had many similar events to this one, but none were as horrible. After that night, I was afraid to go to bed for a couple of weeks. Please keep in mind that English isn't my native language. I'm just really glad that I found a place like this where I can share my experience without being judged or called crazy. This happened on Sunday, the 16th of January, 2022. The first event happened at 8 p.m. I was in the WC of our house. We have a full bathroom and a WC, and I had a coughing fit that sounded really bad. As I have calmed down and I'm trying to catch my breath, I hear my mom's voice coming from the full bathroom asking me if I'm okay. The bathrooms are connected with a common airway, and we usually use it to speak to one another if it's necessary. Otherwise, it's used as an airway. I say that I'm okay and get out of the WC, and I go to knock at the full bathroom's door to reassure my mom that I'm okay, but nobody was in the bathroom. My mom was in her room on her computer. Confused, I asked Mom if she'd been to the bathroom in the past 5 minutes, and she said she hadn't. She didn't want to lose any moment of her friend's radio program, so she was keeping her water intake to the minimum. I just shook my head and go on with my afternoon. The second event happened at 6 a.m. I was about to head to bed after spending the entire night writing. I'm more creative at night. And I decided that it was enough of writing for tonight and went to brush my teeth and pee before bed. I'm peeing when someone knocks on the door, and then I hear my dad's voice asking me if I'm okay. I say yes, and he says all right, before I hear him enter the kitchen and open the small kitchen light, and I hear him preparing the kettle for his coffee and prepare my sister's breakfast. I look at my phone, and it's 6:15 a.m., and I think that Dad might have woken up an hour earlier than usual because he couldn't sleep. He usually wakes up at 7 a.m. and starts waking my sister up for school. It wasn't unusual for my dad to wake up at 6 or 5 a.m. or not sleep at all at night reading comics on his computer waiting for 7 a.m. So I shrug it off and get on with my thing, but when I finish and I'm shutting the light, I turn to say good morning to my dad, but the kitchen is empty and dark. Dad is nowhere to be seen. I gently go to my parents' room, and I can hear my mom's and dad's snores, so I go to my room to sleep. At 7 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my dad's alarm clock, and I get up to go ask my dad if he went to the kitchen around 6 a.m., and he said no, but had a dream of getting a glass of water from the kitchen. I'm still confused about those two events. Any idea what could have happened? I want to preface this by saying I've lived in the same house for 2 years and haven't had any other unexplainable events happen. Tonight, I was running the water from my son's bath. I got my son into the bath, and before I turned off the water, my son said to me, "I hear someone singing." And all of a sudden, I heard a young child singing "Ring Around the Rosie." It freaked me out, so I immediately turned the water off to get him out. As soon as I turned the water off, we heard a child giggling and then complete silence. It's 8:30 p.m., and I'm now terrified to go to sleep. A few years ago, I was with my dad at an old drive-in type of place. It's been on that Guy Fieri show. It looks straight out of the 1950s, but that's their shtick, and the food is incredible. It's odd because it's way out of the way from our town, maybe a 45-minute drive to the middle of nowhere, but you always see mostly people from my town because it's so popular and people are willing to travel to it. After we got our food, we were walking through a small parking lot to another seating area because the bar seating around the place was full, as it always is. This old lady came up to us, but sort of suddenly, as in, normally if someone walks directly up to you, you notice them coming. We didn't see this lady until she was practically right next to us. It was like she came out of nowhere. She seemed odd and very inquiring without saying anything just yet, but still a pleasant demeanor. She looked at me very happily and started talking to my dad, asking about the family and how things were going. She asked very pointed questions about specific people by name. The whole time she kept glancing over at me. My dad runs a small business that has caused him to be a bit of a figure in the community. From a young age, I got used to the fact that any outing will involve a lot of socializations as he just knows so many people, and again, his business more or less requires him to be cordial. When I was a kid, I would get frustrated that we would be leaving someplace, but not really, because he would have to talk to 5 or 6 people on the way out. Usually I can put people in a bucket based on the conversation: work friend, friend from long ago, business, extended family, etc. This lady seems like she fell into the extended family category due to the question she was asking and the fact that she was much older than my dad. She asked my dad who I was, and he said, "That's my son Mark." "Oh, Mark," she said with an extremely happy smile. She turned to me suddenly, and I have to apologize because I think one of the Star Wars movies used this line, but it is the genuine truth that she said this, and goes, "Your eyes. I've seen those eyes before." And with possibly the warmest smile I've ever felt, "You have a good soul." She almost looked proud when she said that she has seen my eyes. I was a bit taken aback, but just smiled politely and said something like, "That's nice of you to say." We said our goodbyes, and I asked my dad who that lady was. This is a rarity for him, but he said, "Honestly, I have no idea who that was. The whole time I was trying to figure it out, but no, I genuinely don't know who that was." My dad is really sharp and gets visibly irritated when he can't remember something, and I could tell he was racking his brain trying to figure it out. He can recite intricate details of our family history and tells many stories, so I could tell he was confused that this individual knew so much about our family, but he didn't know who they were. This has always stuck out in my head. Of course, it's just neat if people recognize something about your soul, and even if I don't understand it, I always find it interesting. Lots of people call me an old soul, and my mother has tons of stories, but I never put too much stock in them until recently as I've gotten older. I really enjoyed reading some of the posts here, so I thought I'd share this story. My sister's mom, we'll call her T, told me a story before about a time from when she was little, maybe 8 or 9. She and her sister, a bit older than her, were walking home at night as the streetlights came on. They lived in a small town where pretty much everyone knew each other. As they were walking home, a boy, teenage, with glowing green eyes comes out from behind a tree and is just staring at them. He had on a gray hoodie. He looked human, but he had glowing green eyes. They both noticed, and she said they both just felt very uncomfortable. The boy starts walking toward them, and they start to panic, so they start running. The boy chases them, and he catches up with them and grabs onto T's arm. T and her sister begin struggling with him, and he's just growling the whole time like an animal while squeezing her arm. He even left a bruise. They finally got T loose and ran as fast as they could to the nearest business. They ran inside and shut and pulled the glass doors behind them as tight as they could, but instead of pursuing them, he just stopped and turned around. They called their mother to come and get them and told them what happened. They called the police, and they began searching for the guy, which she explained he shouldn't have been hard to find because the way the community is set up, there were only so many places he could go. There were woods nearby, but she said if he ran in the woods, he would have been caught because of the dead ends. She said they searched that whole town, and he was never found. They even asked around town, this is a close-knit community, if anyone knew who he was, and no one knew him or saw him before. I guess I'm just trying to figure out if anyone's had a similar experience or know who or what that could have been. All right, this could be rather long, but I want to explain everything in case this has happened to someone else. To provide context, I began hearing certain sounds at night beginning about 3 years ago when I moved into a new apartment. I would usually be in a state of being half awake, half asleep. I would typically hear smooth jazz, piano music, and a woman singing. I would become fully awake and still hear them. These were enjoyable sounds, so I was never scared. I just assumed I had a sleeping pattern or disorder that made me have auditory hallucinations, so I was never too freaked out. I am now living in a completely new apartment. 2 nights ago, I was on my phone and laying in bed and was startled with the loudness of an indescribable guitar making creepy screeching sounds along with an unidentifiable woman's voice screeching nonsense words. The best way I can describe both of these sounds is screeching. Mind you, I was fully awake. My fan was also on, which typically blocks out any external sounds. The noises sounded like they were coming from the front side of my room, either from this large shelf I own or my closet. I immediately texted my roommate to see if he was playing anything loud since his room is right next to mine. He didn't respond until the morning because he was asleep the entire time. I was completely freaked out, so I decided to just stop overthinking and go right to bed. The next day, I was telling my 2 friends about the occurrence. My friend mentioned that I have antique items and that there's a chance that energy could be attached to them. As mentioned before, I have a shelf with various thrifted antique items. I began thinking about how these could have some sort of energy attached, so I decided to take them out of my room and put them in my living room for the night, mainly for my own mental clarity. About an hour after I moved them, I was laying out my vitamins to take for the morning when all of a sudden I hear these extremely loud screeching guitar/electronic sounds. I pause for a moment and just listen. It was really loud, and the noise was coming from my living room. I poke my head out of my bedroom door, and it sounded like these noises were being played off the TV or a Bluetooth speaker. I stepped further outside of my room, and then the sounds stopped after about 20 seconds. The volume of these sounds were unmistakable. It was blatantly obvious that the entire house would be able to hear. I texted my roommate again, asking if he heard the music. He didn't hear a single thing. I asked him if he was accidentally connected to a speaker in the living room. We investigated everything, and there was no way that he was connected to anything. My roommate casually looks back at our text messages and realized that I had texted him about the noises both nights at exactly 3:07 a.m. I am completely freaked out. I have never heard noises like this before. I don't believe it's a coincidence that they occurred at 3:07 every morning. Does anyone know what this could be? Should I just throw away all of my antique items? A few of these items are from my father, who passed 12 years ago. Most of the others are just from thrift stores. I don't care about getting rid of them. I just don't want to hear these sounds anymore. I don't know what to do because I don't know anything about spirits or paranormal activity. If anyone could provide me with any idea of what's happening or how to solve this, it would be greatly appreciated. About a year ago, at the start of the pandemic, I was organizing, deleting, and archiving photos and videos on my phone before moving them to a cloud backup and off my device. I ran across 3 videos that I didn't remember and assumed they were some accident and could be deleted as junk, which happens to me regularly in photos. The videos were from the prior summer, at night, of me walking around the property surrounding my house and whispering and talking softly to someone who is never seen nor heard on camera. The first video was at 3 a.m., and the second was about 3:20 a.m., and they both run for about 45 seconds as if I'm trying to help someone find their way out and saying, "I understand." The shots are mainly of the ground, trees, and moonlit sky as I'm holding the camera, but I do obviously intentionally point it at a tree and then into a shed and down the sidewalk. At the time, I was not taking any medications other than a daily low-dose 20-milligram fluoxetine, which I'd been taking for several years before and still do for anxiety. During that summer of 2019, I was training for a half marathon, wasn't drinking, and was eating healthy. I felt great that summer, better than I do now. The third video starts out around 2:30 the next night with the camera facing me as if I just woke up, gotten out of bed, and I'm telling the cat who is right next to my bed, "It will be okay." I go outside, walk to an area of the backyard under a tree, and say, "This can't go on. We need peace and quiet." I kept saying I'm sorry and I wished it could have worked out before I'm walking out to the street and down the sidewalk as if making a "be gone" or "go away" hand gesture. The recording shows my feet and the sidewalk and concrete as I walk back where I left the door open, and the cat's eyes are reflected in the camera's light before I say, "It's okay now," and the video ends just under 2 minutes. There's absolutely nothing paranormal or unusual to see. There's no other people around. I don't know what I was doing, but it freaked me the fuck out when I played them, encountering myself in them. Absolutely no memory, but the voice is unquestionably mine. It's on my property, and the third one shows my face waking up, as if someone else started recording while my phone was in my hand and I, unaware, for a good 5 seconds. So I am on Instagram pretty regularly. I mostly just post pictures of me or stuff related to me or what I'm doing, memes too. Anyway, a few months ago, this random guy I've never met before starts following me. Usually I don't care who follows me because my account is public. I'm a 17-year-old male, and this is a man in about his 50s, so it's obviously going to make me uncomfortable when he comments on every post. I looked at his account, and it seems pretty normal, just pictures of him and other people. It started when he commented on one of my posts with a meme of a celebrity in it, and he says something like, "I met that guy one time." And I replied like I usually do, with, "Whoa, that's cool," or something, and he replied to that comment talking about the same stuff. He continued to comment on my posts, and I don't post all that often. He wouldn't say weird stuff, just friendly stuff, but it was just recently I began to feel uncomfortable, and now that it won't stop, I'm writing this. I don't remember when exactly, but he commented on a post, "Hey, I replied to your story, but you don't follow me, so you can't see my DM. It's nothing creepy, though." Now, of course, this looks creepy. I don't have any DMs from him as far as I can see. It's weird what he said, though, because I get DMs from people who I don't follow all the time. I didn't really want to be chatting with an older man I don't know anything about because it just made me uncomfortable, so I didn't answer. I screenshotted the comment and sent it to my mom, and she said to just delete it, so I did and went on with my life. It happened again on my next post. He said something like, "You still can't see my DM because you don't follow me. Follow me so we can chat." And I deleted this too, because it was weird. I talked to my parents and they said I could block him, but to me, he doesn't seem to have done anything that bad yet, so I haven't. His next comment said something similar to the last, and also said something along the lines of, "And you know by now it's nothing creepy," and continued to ask me to follow him. I have not. I deleted this comment as well. Again, he comments on an older post where I had already deleted a previous comment. He was talking about my story I had posted where I said for people, friends, or people I know, to DM me if they wanted to help me out with something. He says, "Regarding your story, people can't DM you unless you follow them, and you know I'm not being creepy." Saying you're not being creepy and begging me to follow you so you can talk to me is creepy. It just is. It just gets worse from here. Every single post I make, he will comment something like this on. Every time I delete it, he comments again. He knows I'm deleting his comments, and he's getting angry about it. I am this close to blocking him, but kind of on the fence because I don't know what he'd do next. Edit. After reading many comments, the best way to go through this seems to be blocking the dude. I hesitated at first because I was scared he'd freak out and harass me more, but I am more confident in the information I've learned of how to block him and any new accounts he may make. I don't think he's dangerous, but it's always good to be safe, and he is giving weird vibes. I am blocking him now. I will give an update if anything happens or if I feel I have anything else to add. Thank you all. This just happened last night, and I'm still thinking about it because it scared me so much and was so weird. I work nights and am often driving home alone around 2 to 3 a.m. when the roads are completely deserted. Last night I'm driving home and get stopped at a light, and there is a fairly large man crossing the street to my left with a guy in a wheelchair trailing behind him. They get to the curb and start waving at me and step off the curb to cross where I am stopped. At this point, my light is turned green, and the guy walking is waving his arms in the air at me. It's a 4-lane road, so I figure since he's with someone in a wheelchair, he's just wanting to make sure I see them while they're trying to cross. So I do that acknowledgement wave and stay stopped so they can cross. The large guy suddenly starts drifting away from the crosswalk and seems to be walking toward my car. The guy in the wheelchair continues in the crosswalk, so I don't think much of it until I notice that, no, it's not that this guy is just a little wobbly. He is definitely walking straight toward my car. My light is still green, so I decide I'm just going to go before this guy gets to my door. And so I start driving, and as I'm maneuvering around the guy in the wheelchair, he gets up out of the wheelchair and starts jogging after my car. I floored it at this point and looked in my rear view to see them both just standing there looking in the direction of my car. I don't know what their plan was, but driving to work tonight made me nervous that they'll be out here again on my way home. Hello again, little Vickies. Thanks for listening. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe with the notification bell on. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description. Until next time, be good.